there, everyone. This is Miss G recording a Google Meet session by myself in the afternoon. It's 4:21 on May 6th. Yes, because yesterday was Cinco de Mayo. I'm just chilling in my hammock that I have set up inside my house during quarantine. I've got my puppy with me over there. Um, I'm just going to be available during this time because I know a lot of you aren't waking up this early in the mornings, and I want to be available to read some of Frankenstein with you in case you're having trouble reading it on your own. Um, so that's what we're going to do today. So first, I'm just going to kind of remind you where you can find this stuff. So on your Google Classroom homepage, it should just be on like your main streaming site under stream. But if it gets buried with other announcements and you're having trouble finding it, you go to classwork and you'll notice we have all these units along this side. So again, if things get buried, you click on the Frankenstein unit. And you'll see right here we've got several assignments. We've got um, lesson one article and lesson one video. We have the lesson two video. And then we have the master materials. The master materials are um, your master packet, which has a summary of every lesson and your questions and your focus skill. And it tells you what you need to read each day. So for today, lesson two, it tells us we need to do letter four. We only have two questions to answer. Our focus skill is to first highlight any language that helps build suspense. We need 6 examples. Then, in 2 to 3 sentences, reflect on how she creates suspense using language. So that's going to be right there. So I'm just going to record myself reading through part of the letter. I might look for some suspense, suspenseful language, and highlight it. Maybe we'll answer one of these questions, but you will have to finish the rest of it on your own. So now here's my text. Just for your own edification while you're reading, if you want to make things easier to read, I always like to minimize it up here so that I can see this a little bit better. But I also like to zoom it in sometimes because I'm already getting old and having trouble seeing. So I like to zoom it in to 125. I like to get rid of that, and now I can just see more words on the screen, and I think it makes it easier to read. Okay, so I always like to just scan ahead. Okay, chapter one starts on page 4. So we're really just reading like 3 pages in a little paragraph today. Okay, so letters 1 through 3 summary. The story begins with 4 letters from the lonely English explorer named Robert Walton, written to his sister Margaret Seville. Walton is a captain on a ship headed on the dangerous voyage to the North Pole. To Miss Seville, England, August 5th, 17. So strange an accident has happened to us that I cannot forbear recording it, although it is very probable that you will see me before these papers come into your possession. Last Monday, July 31st, we were nearly surrounded by ice, which closed in the ship on all sides, scarcely leaving her the sea room in which she floated. I'm assuming the she he's talking about is his ship. Our situation was somewhat dangerous, especially as we were encompassed around by a very thick fog. We accordingly lay to, hoping that some change would take place in the atmosphere or weather. So that's actually the paragraph I remember from the video lesson. And so I know there's some suspenseful language. I might do like our dangerous, we are encompassed by a very big fog. I might highlight that. So remember, I had to highlight, I highlight it with my pen or with my mouse first. Then I can go up here and do that yellow. About 2 o'clock, the mist cleared away, and we beheld, stretched out in every direction, vast and irregular plains of ice, which seemed to have no end. Some of my comrades groaned, and my own mind began to grow watchful with anxious thoughts, when a strange sight suddenly attracted our attention and diverted our solicitude from our own situation. So, if we're not familiar with the word solicitude, we just go down care or concern of something. So, our care from our own situation. To me, um, when a strange sight suddenly attracted our attention, to me, I would say that's building suspense too. It's like when suddenly, and then we see something else kind of dramatic. We perceived a low carriage fixed on a sledge and drawn by dogs, pass on towards the north at a distance of half a mile. A being, which had the shape of a man, but apparently a gigantic stature, sat on the sledge and guided the dogs. Okay, so they're seeing some guy in a sled who's gigantic. I'm starting to theorize that maybe this is the monster, Frankenstein's monster. We watched the rapid progress of the traveler from our telescopes until he was lost among distant inequalities of the ice. This appearance excited our unqualified wonder. We were, as we believed, many hundreds of miles from land. But this apparition, which I see down here means a ghost, seemed to denote or to make a sign of that it was not, in reality, so distant as we had supposed. Shut in, however, by ice, it was impossible to follow his track, which we observed with the greatest attention. About 2 hours after this occurrence, we heard the ground sea, and before night the ice broke and freed our ship. We, however, lay to until the morning, fearing to encounter in the dark, those large loose masses which float about us, breaking up the ice. I profited off this time to rest for a few hours. So their ship is finally free, but they're going to rest and wait for the big chunks of ice to float away. In the morning, however, as soon as it was light, I went upon the deck and found all the sailors busy on one side of the vessel, or ship, apparently talking to someone in the sea. It was, in fact, a sledge, like that we had seen before, which had drifted toward us in the night on a large fragment of ice. Only one dog remained alive, but there was a human being within it whom the sailors were persuading to enter the vessel. He was not, as the other travelers seemed to be, a savage inhabitant of some undiscovered island, but a European. Okay, so this guy is not. I'm assuming his savage inhabitant of an undiscovered land is kind of a racist term for a native, like a Native American or a Pacific Islander or someone from, um, like an Eskimo, but he's someone from Europe. He's a white guy. When I appeared on deck, the master said, "Here is our captain, and he will not allow you to perish in the open sea." On perceiving me, the stranger addressed me in English, although with a foreign accent. "Before I come on board your vessel," said he, "will you have the kindness to inform me where you are bound, or where you are going?" You may conceive my astonishment on hearing such a question addressed to me from a man on the brink of destruction, and to whom I should have supposed that my vessel would have been a resource which he would not have exchanged for the most precious wealth in earth can afford. It's a long sentence. So this guy's on the brink of death. I should be seen as his salvation. And he's like, okay, but where are you guys going? He doesn't care that we're going to save him. He just wants to know where we're going. I replied, however, that we were on a voyage of discovery towards the Northern Pole. Upon hearing this, he appeared satisfied and consented or agreed to come aboard. Good God, Margaret, if you had seen the man who had thus capitulated for our safety, let's look down there, surrendered, who had surrendered for his safety, your surprise would have been boundless. His limbs were nearly frozen and his body dreadfully emaciated by fatigue and suffering. He was abnormally thin and weak. I never saw a man in so wretched a condition. We attempted to carry him into the cabin, but as soon as he had quitted the fresh air, he fainted. We accordingly brought him back to the deck and restored him to animation or restored him to life by rubbing him with brandy and forcing him to swallow a small quantity. So they're rubbing alcohol on him and giving him some alcohol to wake him up. As soon as he showed signs of life, we wrapped him up in blankets and placed him near the chimney of the kitchen stove. By slow degrees, he recovered and ate a little soup, which restored him wonderfully. I would argue that just finding this man whose limbs were frozen, who was emaciated by fatigue and suffering, who had never seen anyone in such a condition, I would argue that's some suspense, right? You've got this creepy man on the brink of death, limbs nearly frozen, um, clutching to life itself, and now he's come onto their ship. 2 days passed in this manner before he was able to speak, and I often heard that his sufferings had deprived him of understanding. When he had in some measure recovered, I removed him from my own cabin and attended to him as much as my duty would permit. I never saw a more interesting creature. His eyes have generally an expression of wildness and even madness, but there are moments when, even if anyone performs an act of kindness towards him or does him any of the most insignificant service, his whole countenance is lighted up, as it were, with a beam of benevolence and sweetness that I never saw equaled. But he is generally melancholy and despairing, and sometimes he gnashes his teeth as if impatient with the weight of woes that oppress him. Gnashes means to grind, so he literally grinds his teeth because he's so impatient of his sufferings. Um, okay, creepy. This guy says where's that one line I liked? That, oh, that he's a more interesting creature, that he has eyes of wildness, madness. I like describing. the doctor that way, so I'm going to highlight that. I think that's suspenseful. When my guest was a little recovered, I had great trouble to keep off the men who wished to ask him 1,000 questions. But I would not allow him to be tormented by their idle curiosity. Idle means lazy, a pointless curiosity. In a state of body and mind whose restoration evidently depends upon entire rest. Once, however, the lieutenant asked why he had come so far upon the ice in so strange a vehicle. His countenance, or his facial expression, instantly assumed an aspect of deepest gloom, and he replied, "To seek one who fled from me." Ooh, dun dun dun. So his face immediately turned gloomy, and that he's out there to seek the one who fled from him. Suspense. And did the man whom you pursued travel in the same fashion? Yes. Then I fancy we have seen him, for the day before we picked you up, we saw more dogs drawing a sledge, and a man in it across the ice. This aroused the stranger's attention, and he asked a multitude of questions concerning the route which the demon, as he called him, had pursued. Soon after, when he alone, okay, so the fact that this white man is on the brink of death is calling this larger statured being a demon makes me start to think this is Dr. Frankenstein and his creature that he's chasing him. Soon after, when he was alone with me, he said, "I have doubtless excited your curiosity, as well as that of these good people, but you are too considerate to make inquiries or make questions. Certainly, it would indeed be very impertinent and inhumane in me to trouble you with any inquisitiveness of mine. So I didn't want to bother you with questions, dude. You've been through a lot. And yet you rescued me from this strange and perilous or dangerous situation. You have benevolently or kindly restored me to life." Soon after this, he inquired if I thought that the breaking up of the ice had destroyed the other sledge. I replied that I could not answer with any degree of certainty, for the ice had not broken until near midnight, and when the traveler might have arrived to a place of safety before that time, but of this I could not judge. From this time, a new spirit of life animated the decaying frame of the stranger. He manifested the greatest eagerness to be upon deck to watch for the sledge which had before appeared. He displayed or showed great eagerness. So now there's a chance that that creature could still have survived and be out there, and he is eager to find him. But I have persuaded him to remain in the cabin, for he is far too weak to sustain the rawness of the atmosphere. I'm assuming that the coldness on deck at a ship in the North Pole. I promised that someone should watch for him and give him instant notice if any object should appear in sight. Such is my journal of what relates to this strange occurrence up to my present day. The stranger has gradually improved in health, but is very silent and appears uneasy when anyone except myself enters his cabin. Yet his manners are so conciliating or peaceful and gentle that the sailors are all interested in him, although they have had very little communication with him. For my own part, I begin to love him as a brother, and his constant and deep grief fills me with sympathy and compassion. He must have been a noble creature in his better days, before even now, and being even now in wreck so attractive and amiable or friendly. I said in one of my letters, my dear Margaret, that I should find no friend in the wide ocean. Yet I have found a man who, before his spirit had been broken by misery, I should have been happy to have possessed as a brother of my heart. I shall continue my journey concerning the stranger at intervals, should I have any fresh incidents to record. And now it looks like it's a few days later and he has recorded something else. So I'm going to pause there. You just have a little bit more to continue. Literally, ooh, I don't want to, yeah, that much more to continue reading. I read a decent chunk of it. I've highlighted some examples that I think are building suspense. And then the question, I think we can answer the first one. Describe the condition that Walton finds the stranger in. Um, I think we even highlighted that. What did it say? That his limbs were nearly frozen, his body um, emaciated with fatigue and suffering. I might even Control C and Control V. And if you don't want it highlighted, I can just select it and click none. Um, I want to get rid of that footnote. And so now we've answered the first question. His limbs were frozen, his body dreadfully emaciated by fatigue and suffering. You guys will have to answer the next question. And then your focus skill, you'll say in a few sentences, how do you think she built suspense. So maybe pull out a few of those charged words um, that you think might have helped build that suspense, making the reader want to guess what's going to happen next. Maybe create some kind of fear. I mean, I think the setting, the ominous setting of the thick fog, a strange sight, diverted our attention. So you want to pick some language and explain how does that help build suspense, and then you'll be done for today's reading. Okay, well, if you guys, I'm gonna start presenting. If you guys ever need anything else, please just feel free to reach out. Like I said, I'll be here at 4 p.m. every day if you want to pop in. Also, we have the regular morning time schedules, and that's about it. Bye bye.